Good evening and welcome to Myths for Sleep. I'm James, and tonight we'll journey into the complex world of Loki, the Norse god of transformation and change. Discover how this enigmatic shapeshifter challenged the gods of Asgard, catalyzed cosmic transformation, and embodied the eternal dance between order and chaos. If this story guides you toward peaceful slumber, please like this video and let me know in the comments what mythological tale you'd like to hear next. Your support helps me create more soothing stories for your restful nights. Settle in comfortably and let yourself drift away with the timeless wisdom of the great shapeshifter. In the primordial mists of creation, when the cosmos existed as a delicate balance between fire and ice, there emerged a being whose very nature embodied the transformative forces that would shape all existence. This was Loki, born not of the familiar order of Asgard, but from the ancient lineage of giants, those primordial beings who represented the wild, untamed forces of nature itself. His father was Farbauti, whose name means cruel striker, a giant associated with the destructive power of lightning and sudden change. His mother was Laufey, also called Nal, whose name speaks of the needle-thin branches of trees and the delicate yet persistent growth that can crack even the mightiest stones. From this union of destruction and persistence, of sudden violence and gradual transformation, Loki inherited his complex and contradictory nature. Unlike the other gods of Asgard, who embodied specific domains and maintained consistent forms, Loki was born as a creature of pure possibility. His shape-shifting abilities were not learned skills, but expressions of his fundamental essence as a being who existed between categories, between order and chaos, between creation and destruction. He could become anything because, in a sense, he was already everything and nothing simultaneously. The young Loki discovered his extraordinary abilities gradually, beginning with small transformations that reflected his emotional states. When frightened, he might unconsciously shrink or become translucent. When angry, his form could flicker with inner fire or expand to intimidating proportions. When curious, he found himself able to take the shape of small creatures that could explore hidden spaces and observe without being noticed. These early manifestations of his power often caused confusion and concern among those around him. Other beings expected consistency, predictability, the comfort of knowing what someone was and would remain. Loki's fluid nature challenged these expectations, making him simultaneously fascinating and unsettling to those who encountered him. As he grew in understanding of his abilities, Loki learned that his transformations were most successful when they served a genuine purpose beyond mere deception or entertainment. When he changed form to help others, to solve problems, or to explore new perspectives, the transformation felt natural and complete. When he shapeshifted merely to trick or harm, the change remained somehow incomplete, retaining traces of his true nature that observant beings could detect. The giant communities where Loki spent his early years were places of constant change and adaptation. Unlike the structured society of Asgard, with its clear hierarchies and defined roles, giant settlements flowed and shifted like living organisms. Buildings might be rebuilt in new configurations to match the seasons or the community's changing needs. Relationships formed and reformed based on current circumstances rather than ancient traditions. In this environment, Loki's shape-shifting abilities made him a valuable mediator and problem solver. When disputes arose between different factions, he could literally see all sides by taking forms that allowed him to understand each perspective fully. When practical challenges required innovative solutions, his ability to become different creatures or beings enabled him to explore options that others could not even imagine. His gift for languages and communication developed naturally from his shape-shifting abilities. As he took different forms, he absorbed not just their physical capabilities, but their ways of thinking and perceiving the world. He learned the silent language of stones, the swift communications of wind and flame, the deep songs of growing trees, and the complex social signals that govern the behavior of various animals. This linguistic versatility made Loki a natural diplomat and messenger between different groups who might otherwise have difficulty understanding each other. He could speak to the earth giants in their rumbling, slow cadences, while also communicating with the swift frost giants in their sharp, cutting phrases. Fire beings found in him someone who could match their passionate intensity, while water spirits appreciated his fluid adaptability. However, Loki's abilities also brought unique challenges and isolation. His capacity for change made it difficult for others to form deep, trusting relationships with him. How could someone love or befriend a being who might be fundamentally different tomorrow than they were today? This uncertainty created a barrier between Loki and those around him, leaving him often lonely despite his ability to take any form that might be desired. The young shapeshifter began to understand that his greatest challenge would not be mastering his transformative abilities, but learning how to use them in ways that brought genuine connection rather than further separation. He sensed that his true purpose involved serving as a bridge between different aspects of existence, helping others navigate the changes and transformations that were as much a part of life as breathing. His journey toward understanding would take him far from his giant origins, into the realm of the Aesir gods, where his unique nature would be both celebrated and feared. There, among beings who prize stability and order, Loki's fluid essence would catalyze events that would transform not just individual lives, but the entire cosmic order itself. The seeds of his future complexity were already present in these early years, as he learned that every transformation carried consequences. Every change created new possibilities, along with new challenges. His path would be one of constant learning, constant growth, and constant questioning of the boundaries that others accepted without thought. When Loki first arrived in Asgard, the realm of the Aesir gods, he brought with him an energy unlike anything the established divine community had previously encountered. The gods of Asgard had created a society based on honor, duty, and the maintenance of cosmic order. Each deity held specific responsibilities. Odin pursued wisdom and knowledge. Thor protected the realms from giants. Frigg oversaw domestic harmony, and Balder embodied perfect goodness and light. Into this carefully structured world came Loki, whose very nature challenged the foundations upon which Asgard was built. He formed a particularly complex relationship with Odin, the All-Father, who recognized in this shapeshifter a kindred spirit driven by insatiable curiosity and willingness to venture into forbidden territories in pursuit of knowledge and power. Odin and Loki became blood brothers through an ancient ritual that bound their fates together across all the 9 realms. This bond was more than friendship or alliance. It represented a recognition that both beings understood the necessity of change and transformation, even when such changes might be uncomfortable or dangerous for those around them. They shared a willingness to sacrifice immediate comfort for long-term wisdom and growth. The relationship between these two complex figures created ripple effects throughout Asgard that would influence the development of Norse mythology's most compelling stories. Where Odin gathered knowledge through careful observation and strategic sacrifice, Loki explored through direct experience and experimentation. Where Odin maintained the dignity and authority expected of a ruler, Loki embraced the freedom to question, challenge, and transform established patterns. Loki's interactions with Thor, Odin's son and the god of thunder, revealed another facet of his complex role within the divine community. Thor embodied straightforward strength and heroism, approaching problems with direct action and overwhelming force. His hammer Mjolnir was a tool that solved most challenges through the application of divine power, making complex strategies unnecessary in most situations. The shapeshifter found in Thor both a valuable ally and a fascinating study in contrasts. Where Loki's solutions involved subtlety, deception, and creative thinking, Thor preferred honest confrontation and decisive action. Yet their different approaches often complemented each other perfectly, with Loki's clever strategies enabling Thor's heroic interventions to achieve maximum effectiveness. Many of their adventures together demonstrated how transformation and stability could work in harmony when properly balanced. Loki might disguise himself to infiltrate a giant stronghold and gather crucial intelligence, while Thor would use this information to plan a direct assault that freed captured gods or retrieved stolen magical items. Their partnership showed that change and consistency could reinforce rather than undermine each other. However, Loki's presence in Asgard also created tension and conflict that reflected deeper philosophical differences about the nature of growth and progress. Many of the gods valued tradition and stability above innovation and change. They had created a society that functioned effectively according to established rules and hierarchies, and they were understandably reluctant to embrace alterations that might disrupt their carefully maintained order. Loki's shape-shifting abilities enabled him to experience life from perspectives that other gods could never access. He could become a salmon and understand the salmon's relationship with the rivers and seas. He could take the form of a fly and observe private conversations that revealed hidden aspects of divine politics. He could become a mare and experience what it meant to be pursued, captured, and transformed by forces beyond one's control. These experiences gave him unique insights into the interconnectedness of all existence and the ways that seemingly separate beings and phenomena actually influenced each other through complex webs of relationship and mutual dependence. His transformations taught him that identity was far more fluid and contextual than most beings realized, and that understanding others required the willingness to temporarily surrender one's own fixed sense of self. The knowledge gained through shapeshifting made Loki an invaluable advisor and problem solver, but it also marked him as different from his divine companions in ways that sometimes created suspicion and misunderstanding. Gods who had never experienced existence from any perspective other than their own sometimes found his insights unsettling or threatening to their worldview. His reputation as a trickster developed not from malicious intent, but from his tendency to reveal uncomfortable truths through unexpected means. When divine society developed blind spots or fell into patterns that limited growth and adaptation, Loki would create situations that forced awareness of these limitations. His tricks often served as wake-up calls that prevented larger problems from developing. For example, when the gods became too comfortable with their superiority over other beings, Loki might orchestrate events that reminded them of their vulnerabilities and dependence on others. When they grew too rigid in their thinking, he would present challenges that required creative solutions and new approaches. His interventions, while sometimes temporarily disruptive, often served the long-term health and vitality of the divine community. The shapeshifter's relationship with the goddess Sigyn represented one of the most stable and nurturing aspects of his complex existence. Sigyn saw beyond his changeable exterior to the consistent core of curiosity, creativity, and genuine care for others that motivated his actions. Her love provided him with an anchor of acceptance and understanding that enabled him to explore his transformative nature without losing touch with his essential self. Through Sigyn's eyes, Loki learned that true intimacy was possible, even for someone whose nature involved constant change. She taught him that love could accommodate transformation while maintaining its own integrity, and that relationships could grow stronger through accepting rather than trying to limit each other's authentic nature. The children born from various aspects of Loki's shape-shifting adventures would play crucial roles in the eventual transformation of the Norse cosmos. Each child embodied different aspects of change and represented various ways that transformation could manifest in the world. Their stories would become central to understanding both the necessity and the consequences of growth and change. Among Loki's most significant contributions to the Norse cosmos was his role in helping the gods acquire some of their most precious and powerful possessions through his shape-shifting abilities and creative problem-solving. These adventures revealed his capacity to turn apparent disasters into opportunities for growth and advancement, though often through methods that made his divine companions deeply uncomfortable. The story of how Thor acquired his mighty hammer Mjolnir began with what appeared to be one of Loki's most destructive pranks. In a moment of mischievous curiosity, he cut off all of Sif's beautiful golden hair while she slept, leaving Thor's beloved wife bold and devastated. The thunder god's rage was so intense that it shook the foundations of Asgard itself, and he threatened to break every bone in Loki's shape-shifting body. Faced with Thor's wrath and Sif's tears, Loki realized that his thoughtless action had caused genuine harm that required more than simple apologies to repair. He transformed himself into his travel form and journeyed to Svartalfheim, the realm of the Dark Elves, seeking their legendary skills in crafting magical items. These master artisans were known throughout the 9 realms for their ability to create objects that transcended ordinary limitations. The Dark Elves, led by the sons of Ivaldi, agreed to help Loki make amends for his mistake. They spun new hair for Sif from threads of pure gold that would grow upon her head and shine more beautifully than her original locks. But Loki, recognizing an opportunity to provide additional gifts that might further demonstrate his regret, commissioned 2 more treasures. Gungnir, a spear for Odin that would never miss its target, and Skidbladnir, a ship for Freyr that could sail through air and water alike. However, the shapeshifter's visit to Svartalfheim was observed by another group of master craftsmen, the dwarfs Broker and Eitri, who claimed they could create even more magnificent gifts than the dark elves had produced. This boast led to a competition that would have profound consequences for all the gods, as Loki wagered his head against the dwarfs' confidence in their superior skills. The contest that followed demonstrated how Loki's seemingly reckless behavior often catalyzed events that brought tremendous benefits to the divine community, albeit through processes that tested everyone's nerves and courage. Broker and Eitri created 3 gifts that would become legendary throughout the 9 realms. Gullinbursti, a golden boar for Freyr that could run through air and water faster than any horse. Draupnir, a golden ring for Odin that would produce 8 identical rings every 9th night. And most significantly, Mjolnir, the mighty hammer for Thor. When the gods judged the competition, they declared Mjolnir the greatest of all the treasures because of its power to level mountains, its unerring accuracy, and its ability to return to Thor's hand after being thrown. The dwarfs had won their wager and came to collect Loki's head as promised, but the shapeshifter argued that while they could claim his head, they had no right to his neck, and separating the two without damaging the neck would be impossible. Frustrated by this clever wordplay but unable to refute Loki's logic, the dwarfs instead sewed his lips shut with magical thread as punishment for his silver tongue. Yet even this painful consequence could not diminish the fact that Loki's initial mischief had ultimately resulted in the gods acquiring some of their most powerful and valuable possessions, including the weapon that would prove crucial to Thor's role as protector of the realms. This pattern of apparent destruction, leading to unexpected benefits, characterized many of Loki's interactions with the divine community. His actions often forced the gods out of their comfort zones and into situations that required them to grow, adapt, and discover new aspects of their own capabilities. While his methods were frequently uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous, the ultimate results typically strengthened and enriched the entire divine society. Loki's shape-shifting adventures also led to the birth of children who would play crucial roles in the cosmic order, though not always in ways that pleased the gods of Asgard. During one transformation, he became pregnant and gave birth to Sleipnir, an 8-legged horse who became Odin's mount and could travel between all the 9 realms faster than thought itself. This child represented the positive potential of transformation and change, serving as a bridge between different worlds and realities. However, Loki also fathered 3 children with the giantess Angerboda that embodied the more challenging aspects of transformation and change. Fenrir, the mighty wolf, represented the power of growth and change that could exceed all attempts at control. Jormungandr, the world serpent, symbolized the vast, encompassing nature of transformation that touched all existence. Hel, who ruled over the realm of the dead, embodied the ultimate change that all beings must eventually face. These children terrified the gods because they represented changes and transformations that even divine power might not be able to control or direct. The gods' fear led them to take actions that would eventually fulfill the very prophecies they sought to prevent, demonstrating how resistance to necessary change often creates the very problems one hopes to avoid. Loki's role as a catalyst for change extended beyond his own direct actions to his influence on the behavior and development of other gods. His presence encouraged them to question assumptions, explore new possibilities, and consider alternative approaches to familiar challenges. Even gods who disapproved of his methods often found themselves thinking more creatively and acting more flexibly as a result of their interactions with him. The shapeshifter understood that growth and vitality required constant change and adaptation, even when such changes were uncomfortable or frightening. He served as a reminder that stagnation, no matter how comfortable, ultimately led to death and decay, while transformation, despite its challenges, opened pathways to new life and possibilities. His willingness to question authority and challenge established patterns made him both an invaluable ally and a dangerous provocateur within the divine community. The gods needed his insights and abilities, but they also feared the implications of his philosophy that embraced change as the fundamental nature of existence itself. Through all his adventures and transformations, Loki maintained his commitment to growth and learning, even when the lessons were painful and the consequences severe. He embodied the principle that true wisdom required the courage to face uncertainty and the willingness to be transformed by one's experiences. As centuries passed in the timeless realm of Asgard, the consequences of Loki's transformative influence began to weave themselves into an increasingly complex web that would ultimately reshape the entire Norse cosmos. His actions, born from curiosity and a desire to catalyze growth, created ripple effects that extended far beyond their immediate circumstances, teaching profound lessons about the interconnected nature of all existence. The shapeshifter's relationship with the concept of fate became particularly complex as he began to understand how his choices influenced not just his own destiny, but the destinies of all the gods. Unlike his divine companions, who often accepted the pronouncements of the Norns as unchangeable decree, Loki maintained his belief that conscious choice and creative action could alter even seemingly predetermined outcomes. His ongoing interactions with the 3 children he had fathered with Angrboda revealed the tragic consequences that could arise when fear of change led to attempts to control or suppress natural development. The gods' decision to bind Fenrir arose from prophetic warnings about the wolf's role in Ragnarok, but their betrayal of his trust through deception and imprisonment ensured that the prophecies would be fulfilled exactly as foretold. Loki watched with growing concern as his son Fenrir grew from a playful cub into a magnificent wolf whose strength and intelligence surpassed all expectations. The young wolf lived peacefully among the gods, showing no signs of the destructive tendencies that the prophecies described. Only Tyr, the god of war and justice, was brave enough to feed and care for Fenrir directly, developing a genuine friendship with the extraordinary creature. However, as Fenrir continued to grow, reaching proportions that dwarfed even the largest natural wolves, the gods' fear overwhelmed their wisdom and compassion. They commissioned the creation of Gleipnir, a magical chain that appeared as delicate as silk, but was forged from impossible things: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. When the gods challenged Fenrir to test his strength against this deceptively fragile-looking restraint, the wise wolf sensed their treachery and agreed only on the condition that one of them place a hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. Only Tyr possessed the courage and honor to make this sacrifice, knowing that his hand would be forfeit when Fenrir discovered their deception. The binding of Fenrir represented a turning point in Loki's relationship with the gods of Asgard, as he realized that their fear of change had led them to perpetrate an act of profound injustice against his innocent son. The shapeshifter understood that by betraying Fenrir's trust, the gods had transformed a gentle creature into the enemy that the prophecies had described, creating through their own actions the very destruction they sought to prevent. Similarly, the gods' treatment of Jormungandr, the world serpent, demonstrated their inability to accept aspects of existence that challenge their comfort and understanding. Rather than seeking to understand this magnificent creature who embodied the vast, encompassing nature of change itself, they cast him into the oceans surrounding Midgard, where he grew to encircle the entire world. The exile of Hel to rule over the realm of the dead showed the same pattern of fear-based rejection of necessary aspects of existence. Rather than honoring her unique role as guardian of the transition between life and death, the gods relegated her to the darkest realm, treating death itself as something to be hidden away, rather than integrated into their understanding of cosmic balance. These actions revealed to Loki that the gods' commitment to order and stability had become so rigid that they could no longer adapt to new realities or accept the natural consequences of growth and change. Their fear of transformation had transformed them into agents of the very destruction they sought to avoid, creating a tragic irony that would echo throughout the remaining ages of their reign. The shapeshifter's growing disillusionment with divine society was compounded by his observations of how the gods treated other beings who embodied change or challenged established patterns. Giants who possessed wisdom or offered genuine friendship were still viewed with suspicion because of their origins. Magical creatures who could have been valuable allies were driven away or destroyed because their nature differed from accepted norms. Loki began to understand that his role as catalyst for change was becoming increasingly difficult to fulfill within a community that had become more committed to preventing change than to growing through it. The gods' fear of prophecy had made them reactive rather than proactive, focused on avoiding predicted outcomes rather than creating better alternatives through conscious choice and creative action. His relationship with Odin became particularly strained as the All-Father's pursuit of wisdom increasingly focused on learning how to prevent Ragnarok rather than understanding how to transform its destructive potential into opportunities for renewal and growth. The blood brotherhood that had once united them in their shared curiosity now became a source of tension as their approaches to knowledge and change diverged. The shapeshifter realized that his attempts to encourage growth and adaptation were being interpreted as threats to divine authority and cosmic stability. Actions that he intended as helpful challenges to complacency were being seen as acts of rebellion or betrayal. The very qualities that had made him valuable to the gods during their period of expansion and development now made him seem dangerous during their phase of consolidation and protection. Yet Loki could not abandon his fundamental nature or his commitment to transformation, even when it placed him at odds with those he had once considered family and friends. He understood that change was not optional, but inevitable, and that attempts to prevent necessary transformation would only make the eventual changes more violent and destructive than they needed to be. The tragedy of his situation was that his love for the gods and his desire to help them grow and adapt was being misinterpreted as hatred and destructive intent. His warnings about the consequences of their rigid thinking were dismissed as threats, and his efforts to prepare them for necessary changes were seen as attempts to hasten those changes for malicious purposes. As the web of consequences grew more complex and the misunderstandings deepened, Loki began to see how his story would contribute to the great transformation that awaited the Norse cosmos. His role as agent of change would continue, but it would take forms that even he had not anticipated, leading to conclusions that would test everything he had learned about the nature of transformation, sacrifice, and renewal. The most tragic chapter in Loki's complex relationship with the gods of Asgard began with what appeared to be a simple nightmare, but would ultimately reveal the fatal flaws in their approach to change and transformation. Balder the Beautiful, beloved son of Odin and Frigg, began experiencing dreams of his own death that filled him with such terror that he could no longer find peace in sleep or waking hours. Balder represented everything that the gods most cherished about their golden age: perfect beauty, unwavering goodness, pure wisdom, and radiant joy that brought light to all the 9 realms. His very presence made flowers bloom more brightly, inspired poets to create their finest verses, and reminded all beings of the divine potential that existed within creation itself. The thought of losing such perfection filled the gods with desperate fear. Frigg, consumed by maternal love and terror at the prophecies surrounding her son's fate, embarked upon an unprecedented mission to secure Balder's safety through absolute protection rather than wisdom and preparation. She traveled throughout all the realms, extracting oaths from every substance, every creature, every force in existence that they would never harm her beloved son. Fire swore it would not burn Balder. Water promised it would not drown him. Metals pledged they would not cut him. Poisons vowed they would not affect him. Diseases promised they would not touch him. Even the most dangerous beasts and the mightiest warriors gave their sacred oaths that they would cause no harm to Odin's shining sun. The gods, relieved by Frigg's success, created a new entertainment from Balder's invulnerability. They would gather in great assemblies and amuse themselves by throwing weapons, stones, and various objects at the beautiful god, laughing with delight as everything bounced harmlessly away from him. What had been born from fear had transformed into a celebration of their apparent triumph over fate itself. Loki observed these proceedings with growing unease, recognizing the dangerous illusion that the gods had created for themselves. Their belief that they had conquered death and change through exhaustive precautions revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of how transformation actually worked. They had focused so intently on preventing one specific outcome that they had blinded themselves to the larger patterns that governed all existence. The shapeshifter's concerns deepened when he discovered the single flaw in Frigg's otherwise comprehensive protection. In her thorough journey through all the realms, she had encountered a small mistletoe plant growing on an oak tree near Valhalla. The plant was so young, so seemingly harmless, that Frigg had dismissed it as too insignificant to pose any threat to her mighty son. This oversight troubled Loki profoundly, not because it created a vulnerability, but because it demonstrated how the gods' fear-based approach to protection inevitably contained the seeds of the very destruction it sought to prevent. Their belief that they could achieve absolute safety through controlling every variable had led them to ignore the principle that transformation often comes through the smallest, most unexpected catalysts. The shapeshifter wrestled with the knowledge of this flaw, understanding that it represented far more than a simple gap in protective magic. The mistletoe symbolized the god's inability to accept that change was not an enemy to be defeated, but a fundamental aspect of existence that required wisdom, acceptance, and conscious participation, rather than resistance and control. As Loki contemplated the implications of what he had discovered, he realized that the god's current path would inevitably lead to the very tragedy they sought to avoid, but in a form that would be far more destructive than necessary. Their illusion of having conquered fate would make them complacent and unprepared for the changes that were actually approaching, transforming what could have been a meaningful sacrifice into a senseless catastrophe. The catalyst for the final tragedy came in the form of Herder, Baldur's blind brother, who sat apart from the games and celebrations surrounding his invulnerable sibling. Unable to see the target and lacking the confidence to participate in activities that required precise aim, Herder remained isolated from the joy that filled the great hall of the gods, his exclusion adding a note of sadness to what should have been purely celebratory occasions. Loki, observing Herder's loneliness and understanding the deeper patterns at work in this situation, made the fateful decision to intervene in a way that would reveal the truth about the god's illusory control over fate. He approached the blind god with apparent kindness, offering to help him participate in the games by guiding his aim and providing him with a suitable projectile. The shapeshifter crafted a dart from the mistletoe he had discovered, understanding that this action would serve multiple purposes in the cosmic drama that was unfolding. It would end the gods' dangerous delusion that they had conquered death through comprehensive precautions, reveal the futility of trying to prevent change through absolute control, and demonstrate that transformation often comes through the most unlikely agents and circumstances. When Herder, guided by Loki's directions, threw the mistletoe dart at his beloved brother, the impossible happened. The tiny projectile pierced Baldur's perfect defenses and struck him down, bringing the light of the world crashing into darkness, as the most beautiful of all the gods fell lifeless to the floor of Gladsheim. The silence that followed Baldur's death was more profound than any sound that had ever been heard in Asgard. The gods stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend how their careful plans and exhaustive protections had failed so completely. Their perfect world had been shattered by a blind god's throw and a shapeshifter's guidance, revealing the fragility that had always existed beneath their illusions of security and control. Frigg's wails of grief echoed throughout all the 9 realms, carrying with them not just a mother's anguish, but the cosmic recognition that an age of innocence and certainty had ended forever. The gods' golden age, built on the assumption that they could maintain perfection through vigilance and control, had proven to be as vulnerable as the tiny mistletoe plant that had ended it. In the aftermath of this catastrophe, the gods' shock quickly transformed into rage and a desperate need to assign blame for their loss. Loki, whose role in the tragedy was immediately apparent, became the focus of their fury and their desire for vengeance. They could not accept that their own approach to protecting Baldur had created the conditions for his death, preferring to blame the shapeshifter rather than examining the flaws in their philosophy. The gods' response to Baldur's death revealed the depth of their transformation, from wise rulers into fear-driven reactionaries. Rather than seeking to understand how this tragedy had occurred and what lessons it might offer. They focused entirely on punishment and the restoration of their previous sense of security through the elimination of perceived threats. Loki understood that his actions, while catalyzing necessary change, had also sealed his own fate within the divine community. He had revealed truths that the gods were not ready to accept, forced confrontations with reality that they preferred to avoid, and demonstrated the inevitability of change in ways that terrified rather than enlightened them. Yet even in the face of their rejection and hatred, the shapeshifter recognized that Baldur's death, tragic as it was, had served essential functions in the cosmic order. It had ended the gods' dangerous period of complacency, forced them to confront the reality of their own mortality, and begun the process of transformation that would ultimately lead to renewal and rebirth. The death of the god of light marked the beginning of the twilight of the gods themselves, the start of changes that would eventually consume the entire Norse cosmos. Loki's role as catalyst had reached its most profound and irreversible expression, setting in motion events that would test every assumption and belief that had governed divine society. As the gods gathered to plan their response to this unprecedented crisis, the shapeshifter prepared himself for the consequences of his actions, knowing that his journey toward understanding the deepest mysteries of transformation was far from complete. The path ahead would demand sacrifices and revelations that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the nature of change, growth, and renewal. In the aftermath of Baldur's death, the gods of Asgard faced a choice that would define their character and determine the course of the remaining ages of their reign. They could either seek to understand the deeper lessons embedded within this tragedy, using the crisis as an opportunity for growth and wisdom, or they could retreat into patterns of vengeance and control that would ultimately accelerate their own destruction. The path they chose revealed how completely their fear had overtaken their wisdom. Rather than examining their own role in creating the conditions that led to Baldur's death, they focused entirely on punishing Loki for his part in the catastrophe. Their need for a scapegoat overwhelmed their capacity for self-reflection and genuine problem-solving. Loki, understanding that his time among the gods was ending, fled from Asgard and sought refuge in the wilderness, where his shape-shifting abilities allowed him to evade capture temporarily. He built a house on a mountain with doors facing all 4 directions, enabling him to see approaching threats from any angle. During the day, he would transform into a salmon and hide in the waters of a nearby waterfall, feeling some kinship with creatures that lived in the liminal space between air and water. The shapeshifter's exile gave him time to contemplate the full implications of what had occurred and what was yet to come. He realized that his role as catalyst for change had reached a crucial turning point, and that the gods' response to Baldur's death was creating the very conditions that would lead to Ragnarok, the twilight of their entire cosmic order. His solitude was eventually broken when the gods, led by Odin's wisdom and Thor's determination, finally tracked him to his mountain refuge. They surrounded his house and forced him to flee into the waterfall in his salmon form, but their preparation was thorough. They had brought a net woven by the gods themselves, designed specifically to capture a being of Loki's transformative abilities. The capture itself became a powerful symbol of how the gods' approach to problems had changed from seeking understanding and integration to imposing control and containment. Rather than trying to heal the breach between themselves and their former blood brother, they focused on ensuring that he could never again challenge their authority or force them to confront uncomfortable truths about their own nature. The binding of Loki was carried out with a cruelty that shocked even those who had lost faith in his intentions. They bound him to 3 stone slabs with chains forged from the entrails of his own son Nari, while his other son Vali was transformed into a wolf and driven to kill his brother in a frenzy of uncontrollable rage. This use of familial bonds as instruments of torture revealed how completely the gods had abandoned their own principles of justice and honor. Above the bound shapeshifter, they placed a venomous serpent that would drip poison onto his face for all eternity, ensuring that his punishment would involve constant pain and suffering. Only Sigyn, his faithful wife, remained loyal to him, sitting beside his bound form and catching the poison drops in a bowl to spare him what pain she could. The symbolism of this binding resonated throughout all the 9 realms, as beings everywhere recognized that the gods had crossed a line from which there could be no return. By torturing one of their own family members, rather than seeking justice through understanding and reconciliation, they had demonstrated that fear had completely overwhelmed their capacity for wisdom and compassion. When Sigyn had to leave periodically to empty the bowl of collected poison, the drops would fall directly onto Loki's face, causing him such agony that his writhing would shake the earth itself, creating the earthquakes that mortals experienced as reminders of the cosmic injustice being perpetrated in their name. These tremors served as a constant reminder that the foundations of divine order were being undermined by the gods' own actions. From his position of enforced stillness, Loki gained perspectives on existence that his previous shape-shifting adventures had never provided. The inability to change form, to escape through transformation, forced him to develop new kinds of understanding about the nature of endurance, acceptance, and the patient cultivation of wisdom through suffering. He learned that even the most painful experiences contained opportunities for growth and insight when approached with the right attitude. His binding became a form of involuntary meditation that deepened his understanding of the interconnected nature of all existence and the ways that individual actions rippled through the cosmic web of relationship and consequence. The shapeshifter also gained profound appreciation for Sigyn's loyalty and love, which provided the emotional and spiritual sustenance that enabled him to maintain his sanity and purpose despite his torment. Her willingness to share his suffering voluntarily demonstrated a kind of love that transcended the conditional acceptance he had often experienced from others who appreciated his gifts but feared his unpredictable nature. Through Sigyn's devoted presence, Loki learned that true intimacy was possible even in the most difficult circumstances, and that love could provide meaning and purpose that external circumstances could never destroy. Her sacrifice taught him that the deepest transformations often occurred through accepting rather than fighting against challenging situations. During his long imprisonment, the shapeshifter also developed a deeper understanding of the cosmic forces that were moving toward the great transformation of Ragnarok. He could sense the growing tensions and contradictions within divine society, the increasing rigidity that was making adaptation impossible, and the approaching crisis that would ultimately force the renewal that could have been achieved through conscious choice and gradual change. His bound state became a metaphor for the god's own self-imposed limitations, their fear-driven rejection of change and growth that was trapping them in patterns that could only lead to destruction. Like Loki chained to the stone slabs, they had bound themselves to approaches and attitudes that prevented the flexibility and creativity needed to navigate the challenges they faced. Yet even in his torment, the shapeshifter maintained his fundamental understanding that change and transformation were not enemies to be defeated, but natural processes that required conscious participation and wisdom. His punishment had not changed his essential nature or his commitment to the principles that had guided his actions throughout his complex relationship with the gods. As the ages passed and the signs of approaching Ragnarok became increasingly apparent, Loki knew that his role in the cosmic transformation was far from over. His binding was not an ending, but another phase in his service as catalyst for change, preparing him for the final challenges that would test everything he had learned about the nature of destruction, renewal, and the eternal dance between order and chaos. As the final age approaches and the signs of Ragnarok multiply throughout the 9 realms, Loki's understanding of his role in the cosmic order reaches its deepest and most profound expression. From his position of binding, he perceives how all his actions, all his transformations, and all his relationships have woven together to create the conditions necessary for the ultimate renewal that awaits all existence. The shapeshifter recognizes that his entire journey, from his early experiments with transformation among the giants to his complex relationships with the gods of Asgard, has been preparation for this final phase of cosmic change. Every lesson learned through shapeshifting, every insight gained through his role as catalyst, and every painful consequence of his choices has contributed to his readiness to participate in the great transformation that will reshape all reality. His bound state has taught him that true power lies not in the ability to change external circumstances, but in the capacity to transform one's understanding and response to whatever situation arises. The chains that hold his physical form have freed his consciousness to explore dimensions of existence that his previous constant shape-shifting had prevented him from accessing fully. Through his long imprisonment, Loki has developed a profound appreciation for the patient processes of growth and change that operate on cosmic timescales far beyond individual preferences or desires. He has learned to align his will with these deeper currents rather than fighting against them or trying to force outcomes according to his personal vision of how things should develop. The earthquakes that result from his periodic torment serve as communications to all the realms, announcing that the time of fundamental change is approaching and that beings everywhere must prepare for transformations that will test everything they believe about the nature of existence itself. His suffering has become a form of prophecy, a physical manifestation of the cosmic tensions that are building toward their inevitable resolution. When the bonds that hold Loki finally break as Ragnarok begins, his freedom will represent not escape from justice, but graduation to the next phase of his cosmic education. The skills he has developed through shape-shifting, the wisdom he has gained through his complex relationships, and the endurance he has cultivated through suffering will all be needed for the challenges that lie ahead. His role in the final battle will be neither purely destructive nor purely creative, but rather the embodiment of the transformation principle itself. He will serve as a bridge between the dying age and the age that is being born, helping to ensure that the destruction of Ragnarok serves the purposes of renewal rather than mere ending. The armies he leads will include not just enemies of the gods, but representatives of all the forces of change that divine society has rejected or suppressed. Giants, monsters, outcasts, and marginalized beings will march together under his banner, not out of hatred for the gods, but out of commitment to the transformative processes that the gods have tried to prevent or control. The battle itself will be a cosmic ritual of death and rebirth, with each conflict representing the resolution of contradictions and tensions that have built up over ages of resistance to necessary change. Loki's confrontation with the gods he once called family will be the culmination of their long philosophical disagreement about the nature of growth, stability, and the proper response to the inevitability of change. Yet even as he participates in the destruction of the old order, the shapeshifter maintains his vision of what will emerge from the ashes of Ragnarok. He understands that the death of the gods is not truly an ending, but a transformation into new forms of existence that will embody greater wisdom about the balance between order and change. The new world that will rise from the ruins of the old will incorporate the lessons learned through the tragic conflicts of the previous age. Beings will exist who understand that stability and change are complementary rather than opposed forces, that growth requires the integration of apparent opposites rather than the victory of one side over another. Loki's children, who have been feared and rejected by the gods, will play crucial roles in both the destruction and the renewal. Fenrir's breaking free will represent the return of natural forces that have been suppressed for too long. Jormungandr's emergence from the ocean will symbolize the vast, encompassing nature of the changes that are coming. Hel's role will demonstrate that death is not the enemy of life, but its necessary partner in the eternal dance of transformation. Through his participation in these cosmic events, the shapeshifter will finally complete his education in the deepest mysteries of existence. He will understand fully how individual choices, collective patterns, and cosmic forces interact to create the conditions for both destruction and renewal, and how conscious beings can work with these processes rather than against them. The wisdom he has gained through his journey from curiosity-driven trickster to cosmic catalyst will become available to the beings who inhabit the renewed world. His insights about transformation, change, and the integration of opposites will contribute to creating a more balanced and sustainable form of existence than the previous age achieved. In the eternal cycles that govern all existence, Loki understands that his role as shapeshifter and transformer will continue beyond Ragnarok, taking new forms appropriate to whatever ages follow. The principles he embodies, curiosity, adaptability, the willingness to question assumptions, and the courage to embrace change, will always be needed as long as consciousness exists and growth remains possible. His story serves as a reminder that transformation, while often difficult and sometimes painful, is the fundamental creative force that makes all development and renewal possible. Through accepting and working with change rather than fighting against it, conscious beings can participate in the ongoing creation of reality itself, contributing their unique perspectives and abilities to the eternal dance of existence. The shapeshifter's legacy lives on in every act of creative questioning, every willingness to challenge comfortable assumptions, and every choice to embrace growth over stagnation. His teachings continue to guide those who understand that true wisdom lies not in achieving perfect control over circumstances, but in developing the flexibility and insight needed to transform whatever challenges arise into opportunities for greater understanding and more authentic expression of one's deepest nature. In the end, Loki's greatest transformation is his evolution from a being who changed forms to escape limitations into one who embraces all forms as expressions of the same fundamental creative principle that animates all existence. His journey reminds all conscious beings that they too are shapeshifters, capable of transforming not just their circumstances, but their understanding of what it means to live with wisdom, courage, and love in a universe that is itself constantly changing and growing toward ever greater expressions of beauty and truth. I hope this journey through the transformative realm of Loki has gently guided you toward the peaceful embrace of change and rest. May the shapeshifter's wisdom remind you that transformation, though sometimes challenging, leads to growth and renewal. If you found comfort in this complex tale, consider subscribing to discover more mythological stories that will cradle your nights with ancient wisdom. You can now let this video continue playing in the background. The soothing music that follows will help you drift even deeper into transformative sleep. Allow yourself to sink completely into comfort and relaxation. Just as Loki embraced change as the fundamental force of existence, let this gentle melody guide your own transformation into the most peaceful rest. Sweet dreams.